Thanks, Cliff. Sounds good. So, Paul Minton, an Irish CEA, living in Sydney. Been here since 2016. About 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I left the world of finance to set up an accounting and finance recruitment business called Lemon Talent here in Sydney. And we work with lots of Irish CEAs, making the move to Sydney to try and get them set up with roles upon arrival. What about you, Cliff? You've a similar but different journey to myself.
Yeah, a few more grey hairs. So similar to Paul, I'm in recruitment. Was working with Irish CAs probably 10 years ago, operating a bit more at the senior end now with my own business, and chair of the Chartered Accountants Australian Society. And the reason you have Paul and myself is Paul's also a committee member, and we're here to engage members in Sydney. And yeah, we thought maybe sharing some insights on what it's like to arrive in Australia as an Irish accountant. So, Paul, you're closer to that market. How would you describe the market for Irish CAs coming to Sydney and, I suppose, focusing on the next 6 months, the second half of 2024?
Yeah, look, it is. I won't dress it up. It's tough at the moment. 12 to 18 months ago, we would have had Irish CAs picking up roles before they arrived, getting sponsored very easy. Unfortunately, that's not the case at the moment. The economy isn't where it was. It's a very cost-conscious environment, so there's less roles out there, and it's definitely harder to get sponsored. Unfortunately, when it comes to cost reduction, one of the kind of first cabs off the rank is the sponsorship. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. There's still demand for Irish CAs in Sydney. I would say everyone's getting sorted with jobs eventually. It's just a bit taking a bit longer. So what we're seeing is a lot of Irish CAs coming over, picking up contract roles initially, and then looking to prove themselves and gain Australian experience upon arrival. Yeah, in summary, look, it's a tough market. But if you approach your job search accordingly and prepare, like you'll land a role in Sydney, it might just take you a bit longer than you might have thought originally.
Is there things people can do to put themselves in a strong position for a role before they arrive, or what tips do you have?
Yeah, so this is a question we get all the time. To be honest, like I get the question around whether you can land a job before you come over. Unfortunately, not really the case at the moment. Companies that have roles live generally want you to start within 4 weeks, and usually they want you to interview face to face. So in terms of what you can do before you arrive, I would say get your CV up to date. There isn't many differences between your CV here and in Ireland, but I'd say make sure it's short, sharp, and to the point. Reach out to recruiters before that you come over, so they know when you're arriving. Like we work with loads of CAs, we know when they're arriving. At least then, as roles come up closer to the time, we can actually speak to them and get them set up to interview when they get here. And then look, also, I think like start looking at roles online in terms of what you might be interested in when you arrive. It's always helpful from a recruiter's perspective, that candidates have a clear picture in terms of what they want and what they're after. So I wouldn't say there's a huge amount you can do before you arrive. But when you arrive, it's probably a different story.
All right. And what are your top three tips for people once they land here? And beyond work, how do they settle in, and what are the tips you'd advise?
Yeah, look, like try and get yourself set up for somewhere to stay when you arrive. It's always, I stayed in a couch for 4 weeks when I got here. It's always good to have a base when you arrive, especially when you're going for interviews and getting set up with bank accounts and that kind of thing. So have a bit of a base when you get here. I suppose if we're to pivot towards the work and landing a role in Sydney, a couple of things. Given the market isn't where it was, I would say cast your net wide. So don't be relying on one channel to pick up jobs. I would say speak to recruiters, get your profile on Seek, which is a job portal up here, and also like be proactive. Like I always encourage people to speak to colleagues, ex-colleagues, figure out where they've worked. That will also give you an idea in terms of what companies want to hire Irish CAs. And don't be afraid to message people directly on LinkedIn, hiring managers that have took on Irish CAs previously. Definitely cast your net wide. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because given the market where it is it's more difficult. That's the first. The second would be, I would say, tailor your CV to each role. So don't mass send your CV to each role and keep it the same essentially. Try and be specific and tailor to the job at hand. So you'll be up against competition that will have relevant experience as well. And if you're using the same CV for every role, it just doesn't, I suppose, it's not specific enough when it comes to looking at roles. The last part then is when you land a role. And look, if you are getting to get sponsored, I would say communication is key. So upfront discussions with your manager, is sponsorship a possibility? What do you need to do? What do you need to do once you get there? And then constantly checking in the first 6 months. Have I hit this target or this mark? Where I'm trying to get sponsored. And then what we tell everyone when you get in there, in terms of trying to get sponsored, make yourself indispensable. Make it so that it's very difficult for them to let you go after the 6 months. Getting sponsored isn't like, it's a bit of a cost, but when they look at what the work you've done and the cost of rehiring, etc., it is a bit of a no-brainer if you can make yourself indispensable. So they're my top three, when coming to Australia and trying to land a role once you arrive in.
Awesome.
Cliff, so you're obviously operating at the more senior end of finance, working with the likes of CFOs and stuff. Are there any key skills that are in demand at the moment in the finance space that you want to call out?
Look, taking down the line in terms of being ambitious to be a CFO or be a senior finance person, we're definitely seeing some trends. Linear finance careers where you spend all your time in finance is, questionable. We're seeing CFOs now, coming from experience in different parts of the business, so finance being one part, but also getting in and doing business projects, even having an investor relations time in investor relations to learn how to understand certainly the listed world and what the perspective on the business is there. Storytelling is also added there, and you generally have a different lens on the business performance. We're also seeing people having experience delivering technology transformation, but not from a budgeting and resourcing point of view, more from an enablement of the business operating model. That's pretty hot in financial services, where tech is doing more and more in their operating models. Leadership is always interesting out there, Paul. Again, talking about finance, when finance can become a function, and your finance into a CFO, that sort of world of expertise functionally is great but narrow. And being able to lead other parts of the business, whether that's even a marketing context, an operational context, we're seeing a real ask of people to spend time in different areas if they want to go to that exact level. And then I'll lastly say, the world of data has always been out there. It's interesting at the moment. Still very much big drive towards data-driven decision making, but how systems are playing into that, how AI will play into that. My top tip would be for people to don't forget the influencing skills, the social skills, the communication skills. What was saying earlier on, investor relations, telling the story skills. Data's data, but how you interpret and how you influence. We're seeing a big ask of people to show how to influence senior stakeholders and how they message for them and not what all the data is saying.
Cool. Sounds good. And Cliff, you obviously been doing this a while, 15 years or so in recruitment. As you said, you worked with a lot of Irish CAs over the years. How would you describe the Irish CA brand in Sydney and Australia overall over the last X amount of years?
Look, I was a CA myself, so going back from 2000, I was here in 03, and I got into recruitment in 06. The brand has always been exceptionally high for some different reasons and some consistent one. I think the character of the general persona of the Irish person being quite open and vulnerable and friendly and relational always goes down well in finance here in Sydney, or in business too. The training back there certainly has been recognised here. I think the training through the institute and through the firms is a standout. I'll probably put South Africa second if I was to go rank them, but it's certainly recognised that people are come from a very good, well-trained technical background. And if you look across our business landscape, we've a lot of senior Irish people in not just CFO but CEO positions. So we've integrated the market here and gained a lot of respect. So it's a really strong brand. What gets in its way is the sponsorship, which is nothing to do with chartered accountants or nothing to do with being an Irish chartered accountant. It's more a policy on migration here, but there's probably less of us staying than there was, that sort of 2006 to 2012. We had a lot of people staying because sponsorship was quite easy. Some people now, it's hard and cost of living pressures are real. So, it's not as maybe easy as it was, 10 years ago for anyone arriving now to get that career going. But the brand is exceptional.
Great to hear it. Good stuff. Do we want to run through some of the events, Cliff, that we have coming up?
Yeah, it'd be good. We have the cruise coming up in November, which is a great way to see Sydney on the harbour. So please keep an eye out for that communication. There'll be the St. Patrick's Day lunch in March. There's 4 events a year, and the committee are doing a great job getting more engagement, but please reach out to the committee or myself or Paul when you land if you want to be kept informed. I will also say on your CCAS portal, updating your address to Sydney and getting the Sydney communication is important. Have I covered all the events?
Yeah, you sure have. Yeah, that's it. And I suppose lastly, just Cliff and I just want to say, if you have any questions at all, obviously the portal is there for you to use, but feel free to send us a message on LinkedIn. We get those messages all the time from Irish ACAs moving over. More than happy to chat and give you a bit of understanding what the market looks like. As I said, my name is Paul Minton. Yeah, you'll find me on LinkedIn pretty easy if you need me. And yeah, feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Paul, for your time.
Thank you.